So how are you readying yourself in the morning before you walk into the building to make sure your energy is high and you're looking through a lens of positivity? How are you refreshing yourself throughout the day? When your energy slumps, are you getting up and taking a walk outside or walking through departments to maybe round? How are you recovering from your day? And then how are you restoring your energy on time off? So making sure that you're not only building in prioritized time for family engagements, for work engagements, but also for those efforts that restore your energy, because we can't serve others from an empty cup.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzlaff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage. Welcome to another episode of Culture Change RX. And I've got a repeat guest here with me today, Courtney, one of our coaches. I love these coaching episodes, and I like that our coaches are going to come back over and over again on the podcast. Some of you may remember Courtney from episode 10, which is an episode on behaviors, very important for culture, behaviors. And so if you missed that, go back to episode 10. Today, we're on a whole different topic, and I'll let Courtney introduce herself for those that haven't been introduced to her yet. And then we're going to jump into a topic on time priority and energy management. So, Courtney, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Sue. I'm excited to be back again on the podcast, and just a bit of background on myself. I've been in healthcare for the last 20 years. I started as an admin professional, and through the years, I worked up to an executive level role. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, I learned in my admin role about time, priority, and energy management. And we just have some really exceptional tools here at Capstone Leadership Solutions to supplement some of those best practices. So I'm excited to bring those to you today. As Sue mentioned, I'm a transformational expert on our coaching team. So I'm happy to be here today. Thank you, Sue.
Yes, thanks so much. I love the idea of bringing this topic forward. Some people know this. We're getting ready for our 12th annual Health Executive Forum, our retreat on Mackinac Island that we've been doing for years. And every year we change up the topics to what healthcare executives, CEOs and the like are letting us know, the things that are challenging them, that they want more training and solutions and coaching on. And so 3 T's this year: trust, teamwork, and time. And Courtney led up our efforts to research this challenge of not enough time, how to maximize our time. And so where would you like to start with this idea that as healthcare executives, time is one of those things that we have to figure out, and how best can we maximize our time to maximize momentum?
Absolutely. I always like to start with this concept that time is our most precious non-renewable resource. So we need to be very thoughtful in where we're applying our time. While we can increase our energy reserves, we can't invent more time in the day, but we can be thoughtful in how we're using that time. So when we think about time management, we need to think of the triad effect of time, priority, and energy management. And it's really taking those 3 together and applying what I like to call the 5P model to them, which really helps to dive into how to better outline your day so that you can make the best use of your time, make sure that the priorities that are truly highest priority are getting your focus and attention, and make sure that you're building in time in your day to restore your own energy. Because if that gets depleted, you're not able to bring your best self to your role. You're not able to really tackle those creative and high strategy areas that you know need to be your focal point. So that's where I like to start in terms of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. When people are time stressed, whether it's in a moment, in a day, a portion of a day, or just feeling that way overall, it is one of those big stressors, add on to just the big jobs that healthcare executives have. I remember as a chief nursing officer on Sunday night, I would look at my schedule for the week, kind of just to tee up my mind around my week. And I would see all of these meetings that were multi-booked on top of another, one right after another, 2 or 3 at a time. And I'd have to triage and decide where I was going to spend my time. And that was one of the biggest things I had to decide. I thought every Sunday night was, how really was I going to get through the week and best use my time? So this 5P model has me really intrigued. It probably has others. What's the 5P model that you're talking about?
So the 5P model is prioritize, plan, perform, pause, and then pivot. So if we're trying to do everything at once, or if everything's a priority, then nothing is a priority. So it's really important that, now I know that your to-do list is probably pages long. It might be an entire notebook, but it's really important that at the end of every week, you're projecting out to the next week and you're thinking through, what are my high priority items? And you're pulling those out. And I'm not just talking about in the workplace priorities. Is there a baseball game you are committed to getting to the next week? Is there an appointment that you've rescheduled 3 times and that needs to be a priority? And so when we think of this work-life integration concept where there's going to be times when your priorities land in that work bucket, but there's also going to be times where your priorities land in that personal bucket. And really having a healthy balance there of identifying your priorities before the week even begins is how you make sure those stay front and center. Now, we like to use here at Capstone Leadership Solutions something called a focus and action guide. It helps us to keep our priorities in front of us, daily priorities, weekly priorities, and then priorities for the month. And we will link that in the supplementary tools for you so that you can take a look at what that is. Really, it helps us to stay focused, and then we can establish our one-off priorities around that. Now, when you're setting up your priorities, I do want to encourage you. This is something that I have recently really latched onto, the creative procrastination. So if you have something that's not due for another month, and you're not going to be holding anybody else up, that shouldn't land in next week's priority bucket. That can wait, and you can allow other priorities to filter to the top. So that's what I mean by prioritize, is really determine what your top big rocks will be for the upcoming week, both personally and professionally, and make sure you're committing to those. Those are your front and focus items for that upcoming week.
I love that you mentioned the focus and action guide. We use it internally. A lot of the things that we teach our healthcare organizations and their leaders and their executives to use, we use them to run our business too. So we personally use a focus and action guide as well, modified for our work at Capstone. But it's this idea too that, like once you know that this is a priority and we've got this big rock, this big thing, whether it's a project, a goal, a strategy, or whatever, or even a standard, like when we were talking about behavior standards in the last episode, you can take a standard that's, an area of improvement or focus, and you can decide how to incorporate it into the things you already do in the day. A lot of times we think we got to add extra steps, extra tasks, extra actions, versus saying, okay, I'm already going to this meeting. I'm already meeting with this person on X. Can I bring in Y? How can I incorporate, having this training, how do I incorporate it in so you don't have to add another training, right? So I love that idea of getting it. And if you're not really that organized on what your top focuses are, then you can't even make that decision. Where do I put it? And so, yeah, I love that. So
then once you've got those priorities in order, that's when you move into the plan. And this is the really fun spot when you're mapping out. Sue, you had mentioned the Sunday evening, kind of looking at what's overlapping in the upcoming week, because we've all experienced that. And so what I like to do and what I recommend is on Friday, after you've set your priorities for the upcoming week, personally take a look at your calendar for that next week. So like this should be your last hour of the day where you're projecting forward and wrapping up the current week. Look at your calendar. And if you have something sitting on your calendar that you don't know what that meeting is for, you haven't seen an agenda, you don't know the objective for that meeting, reach out to the person organizing that meeting, because at this point, everything on your calendar should be clear what that time is intended for. And then as you start to identify conflicting meetings and conflicting engagements, take a look back at your priorities and really determine what lines up next week. So this is how you can really intentionally and purposefully set up your time in the upcoming week to align with your priorities, making sure that you've got an agenda, an objective, and you know how your time's being spent each day. In addition, in that planning phase, I also use a daily planner. So in your morning, when you're just starting out the day, make sure that in my planner, I'll have it linked in this description as well, or in the solutions. It prompts you to start with gratitude so that right at the top of your day, you are identifying what you're grateful for. And then you will start to see that throughout your day. And then your top 3 non-negotiables. So if you get to nothing else throughout your day, the whirlwind just sucks you up and spits you out. If all you were able to accomplish was those top 3 non-negotiables, you had a highly successful day. And this is also very helpful for when you have small gaps between meetings. Say a meeting adjourns 30 minutes early or 10 minutes early, and you're wondering, where can I best use this time? You've already determined your non-negotiables. You already know where your focus should go. So that's how the plan phase of the 5P model really works.
I love that it's so proactive too. You know, like, well, the whirlwind is very reactive, right? Day-to-day operations and the issue or problem of the day is very reactive, and we can't always plan necessarily for that. We don't know how big that's going to be on a given day or what it's even going to entail and how much of our time it's going to take. But for what we can plan and we can do, being very proactive. And I love your point about, you know, if you got a meeting on your schedule and you have no idea the true objective and plan and an agenda for that meeting that you've been invited to, you know, you can't even assess whether that's the best use of your time. And if there's anything you need to do to prepare, you can't even do that. And so I think that really speaks to this idea in our cultures that we want to get more proactive versus reactive. It's like there's a calmness in an organization where we're systematically more proactive versus being drug around by the whirlwind. But also I think it shows respect. I mean, if you think about the implications of time and culture, I think it shows respect for people when we respect time, when we respect things like being proactive, being organized. I don't know. I when we think about the connection between time and culture, that's where it fits in for me. I don't know what your thoughts are on this idea of how we manage our time on our priorities and our energy and its implications on workplace culture.
Absolutely. Sue, I'm glad you mentioned the managing time and showing the respect through that time component. So when you get into the perform P of this model, that is all about taking that daily planner, what you have identified as your priorities, and carrying that into your day. So a Harvard Business Review study had shown that executives spend 61% of their work time in meetings. That's a lot of time to spend in meetings. But one of the things that you can do, one of the best practices for time management in terms of all that time you spend in meetings, is to start on time and end on time. And I recommend ending 10 minutes before a normal end time for a meeting. So if the meeting's usually 60 minutes, end it at 50 minutes. That way, if people are back to back, you're showing respect for that little bit of a gap they have between meetings. If you find that you're facilitating the meeting, maybe you're the chairperson and you have great conversation going on a topic and you already know it's going to run over, take a pause. just take a breather, identify which topics could be tabled to the next meeting, and then let the team know that we're going to finish this great conversation, and then these topics will come back the next time. That is showing great respect for your team's time when you start and end meetings on time. And I know that sometimes you don't want to stifle that great conversation taking place. It's just a matter of reorganizing what's covered during that meeting time. So that's one of the big components for Perform. But the other big component, what about email management? It can be really easy to grab ourselves a block of vital time. So time when we are going to close our office door for 1 hour and we are going to focus on strategy, goals. We're going to move things forward, and our inbox is calling our name. And so that is not how we want to be using that strategy time for email cleanup. So a couple of things that I did when I was working as an executive, and I still practice today. The first thing is I had established with my division of direct reports turnaround time on all email communications. So they would hear back from me within 48 hours when I was in the office with receipt that I have received their email communication and my planned turnaround time on that. So what are my next steps for getting back to you? What that did was they didn't have to send me another communication 4 days later saying, hey, did you get this? And I could file that email into a file folder in my inbox so that it wasn't loading down my inbox because I've already transferred that to my master task list. Additionally, at the end of the week, I would never leave the office with email sitting in my inbox. So a lot of times what was sitting in my inbox at the end of the week were those things that would take 2 to 3 minutes to respond to. But that's why I didn't do it in the moment. It was so quick and easy to do, I figured I'd get to it later. So that's just another way that you can clean out that inbox at the end of the week so that you're not coming in on Monday and feeling overwhelmed already. That's the power of that last hour on a Friday, is to really close things down, evaluate the week, and prep for the upcoming week.
I think too, speaking of the implications of time on culture, one of the things that I'm speaking about at our upcoming Health Executive Forum is the topic of trust. And as we were working on these topics, Jane, you and I on trust, teamwork, and time, we realized how much they overlap so much. But to your point about your team could trust your response time. Like they knew what it was. And every time you followed through and followed up on that, like that was your plan, that was your standard. And every time you honored that, you were building trust in the process. And so they could trust that within 48 hours, X is going to happen. And that's really important too. So, you mentioned also vital time, and you mentioned it's that dedicated time to move things forward and to focus. Are there other examples of, how healthcare executives can utilize vital time to really maximize their efforts? Just taking this quick break to let you know that the registration deadline is coming up soon for our Healthcare Executive Forum that is happening on June 12th and 13th, 2024 at Mission Point Resort on beautiful Mackinac Island here in Michigan. Join us for these 2 days of immersive learning, engaging discussions, and networking opportunities. Go to capstoneleadership.net. This year's topic is maximizing momentum with trust, teamwork, and time. Registration deadline is May 20th. Get your spot today, capstoneleadership.net.
Absolutely. Vital time, I'm going to link this back to trust again, Sue. So vital time is one of those things where, as a servant leader myself, I always wanted to have an open door policy, but it was serving my team if I took the time to strategically work on our goals, to strategically work on a change that they've requested in the department. And so this use of vital time, this is something that I highly recommend you build in 2 blocks in your week of vital time, because what you're working on Tuesday, you might have a different focus by Thursday, or something may have shifted and you're ready to set in place. And so when you're thinking of vital time, number one, turn off all distractions. Shut off your email, shut off the pings on your phone. Your team knows where to find you if there's an emergency, but otherwise it is completely focused on the project at hand. Number two, allow yourself to get really creative. If you're working on your department goals or you're working on a pillar of the strategic plan that's been assigned to you, really use that time to get deep in that creative space, because it takes that uninterrupted time to move things forward faster. And so we can be so much more creative and get so much more accomplished in an hour of uninterrupted time than we might do in our entire day. And that's just because we're pulled in so many different directions. And so vital time is a hardwired practice in my routine. And it's something that if used effectively and your teams understand what vital time means, it can go a long way for building trust and teamwork in that regard.
I want to also circle back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier in the conversation about meetings, because, yep, indeed, we spend a lot of time in meetings, and, starting and ending on time it just is common courtesy, it seems, right? But think of how many times we've all been subject to or the culprit of, a situation where a meeting starts late or goes over and the time isn't maybe used to the best as it could be for some or all of the people present. But one thing that I noticed that happened later in my career inside as a hospital executive was when we started daily safety huddles or briefings, which is really a meeting, right? It's meant to be a short, brief meeting, highly purposed, right? You know who's going to be there, when and where it is, it's very highly prescribed as far as meetings go, or at least it should be if it's done well and right. But what was really interesting, just to bring up a point here, is that when we started that practice and we were really hard set on, we're going to add this daily meeting, which nobody wants to add a meeting. We're going to add this meeting. This is how it's going to go. It's going to start on time. It's going to take less than 15 minutes. It took about an average of 7 to 8. It's going to have this agenda. We're always going to do this. We're always going to report in this order and et cetera. What we noticed happened after that is that one thing started to change the culture of all meetings, because we're like, wow, we can get a lot done. Really important stuff. Safety. We can get so much done in a short period of time of meeting. How can that apply to everything else? Like, how can we start bringing that? So it actually started to change our culture about meetings when we added that meeting. So just to add to your emphasis to your point about starting and ending on time and respecting time in that way.
Absolutely. And I love that point, Sue, because sometimes these minor changes that feel like additions in the day can be the change that was needed to really streamline things. So a couple of things to that. Making sure every team has a team charter. If you're wondering how you even start with evaluating whether every committee, if there's any duplication, or whether every committee is still serving its primary purpose, making sure that all of your teams have a team charter is really an important practice. And then the next thing to that is utilizing a consent agenda. So if you have reports that you're giving at a meeting and they're just regular reports, using the consent agenda to send those reports through, and then having big topics available for that conversation time, that can really be a game changer as well. So just a couple of additional items that you can use or apply in your organization to really use the time well that is spent in meetings.
Yeah, valuable time, and we either make the best of it or we could waste it or anywhere in between. Which one of the P's haven't we? Maybe several. Where are we on the P's? Let's make sure we get all the P's in. 2 left.
Pause. And this is really about restoring your energy levels. So the first one's a little bit different, the first level of this. So for pause, one of the components to think about is where your energy is the highest throughout the day. So make sure that you're applying your time to strategy focus, to key conversations at key meetings where your energy is peaking during the day. So that's one component of pause, to really reflect on your energy. And the second component is what we like to call it capstone, the 4 R's of well-being. So how are you readying yourself in the morning before you walk into the building to make sure your energy is high and you're looking through a lens of positivity? How are you refreshing yourself throughout the day? When your energy slumps, are you getting up and taking a walk outside or walking through departments to maybe round? How are you recovering from your day? And then how are you restoring your energy on time off? So making sure that you're not only building in prioritized time for family engagements, for work engagements, but also for those efforts that restore your energy, because we can't serve others from an empty cup. And so that needs to be a non-negotiable in your day, where you're doing something to restore your energy continuously.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I heard it again this morning. I was on a call with a healthcare executive team of a small hospital on the East Coast. And I heard a thing that I hear a lot is how it feels at a leadership level, not just senior leadership level, but at a frontline leadership level. And I'm sure that trickles right down to the front lines as well, where it feels like we're all at max. Like we're just like, that idea of just adding that daily safety briefing might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, like one more thing, right? But, it's interesting, the analogy that I've used recently, and I don't know if this resonates in some of the materials that you'll be bringing forth, but it's unrealistic to think that things aren't going to change and there's not going to be new pursuits or new goals. There's going to be more of it, right? What I was mentioning to them is, sometimes when somebody hands you one more ball or assigns you to one more meeting or one more project, you just add it on to the pile. Like, right? You just so you're already overwhelmed, you're already maxed out, or you think you are, and they add that one more and you just pile it on, and there you are with more to do, needing more time, needing more energy. But when you hand somebody 5 balls, because a lot of times when we're working with organizations and we come in, we say to the leaders, wow, there's 9 core leadership practices. Maybe some or all of these are things you haven't been doing. So those will be ads, right? And they're like, wait a minute, I'm already too busy. I'm already too maxed. And you're going to hand me 9 balls, But I think what that does, and this is kind of the analogy I use, Courtney, is that when you hand somebody a whole bunch of balls, they have to ask that question, what do I put down? What do I put down? And if you're just incrementally adding one and then another and another, you don't often stop to say, what isn't serving me? What isn't the best use of my time? And that answer can be different across many people in an organization, or personal, or both. But, any thoughts about tips or tricks about deciding what not to do?
You bet. Okay, so in terms of this topic, I would say delegation is your friend. And I know that for a lot of us in healthcare, we came up through the ranks. We worked hard. We were great in our roles. We assumed leadership roles, executive roles. And in that time, there might have been things that we held on to because we knew we were really great at it and we didn't want to let it go. And so really evaluating what actually requires your time. So if you think back to that Harvard Business Review study, and 61% of an executive's time is spent in meetings, that is a huge chunk of time, leaving, a smaller subset for strategy work, for goal work, for the whirlwind that's going to be required every now and then. So really delegating that work out. And when you delegate, here's what I always like to advise. Delegate with the requirements of the task you're assigning off, not necessarily how they're going to do it. Every person works differently. Everybody looks at things a little bit differently. And you may find that when you hand it off to a new person, they take a whole new spin on it, and it's really amazing. They elevate it from good to great to even greater. And so challenge what you're holding on to against your priority list. Challenge what you're holding on to against the work that you need to do on goals and strategy and board meetings and executive meetings and everything else that's in your day. And if it's something that gives someone else an opportunity to grow, gives them an opportunity to develop a new skill set, or simply does not fit on your plate anymore, that should be delegated off. And so that's one way that you can take ownership of determining where your time gets placed, is by not holding on to everything. And I've been guilty of it too, allowing others to take those balls and run with them and turn them into something really amazing.
Yeah. It is nice to have a model, like a 5P model that can help organizations or individuals, can it, Courtney? I mean, I would suspect that it could be used by either.
Absolutely. Well, and when you're thinking of what fits and what doesn't, that's where pivot comes in. That last 5P is pivot. And so when something gets added to your plate that is truly a high priority and has to take your focus, that's where you go back to your list of priorities and say, what can take a back seat to this? Or when you're in the middle of a fiscal year and there's a major equipment malfunction that was not included in the budget, proactively determining which capital items this year are highest priority, so that you've got some automatic flex room built in to swap things out if something unexpected happens during the year, and we know that it always does. And so really building in some flexibility to your processes to be able to pivot easily. I really appreciated at my prior organization, we had like a level of authority for approval document that would say at what level of expense requires management approval, executive approval, and that would prevent any delays. So if I were the manager and it fell below that level, I knew I could just move forward with things. So that is another way that you can manage time, because they're not having to filter through several layers if it's something smaller. And so really thinking through at an organization level, what processes can we set up to really leverage time most effectively, and preventing duplicative efforts is one way that we can do that.
So as we wrap up on this topic today, I'm just so excited about the depth we're going to be able to go to on this topic and have executives network and converse and problem solve around this with some of the guidance of the 5P model and the focus and action guide. But is there any final tip or trick or something that you want to share with this audience before we close out this episode today, Courtney?
So we've covered a lot today, a lot of strategies that you can apply, a lot of concepts that you can carry forward in your organizations. If you were going to take one thing, and it's actually two things, away from this talk to immediately apply, because if we try and do it all, again, it makes it very difficult. I am going to advise you to grab the focus and action guide and the daily planner and start building that into your Friday afternoon routine and your weekday morning routine to really make sure you're clear on your priorities for the upcoming week. And then each day you're clear on your non-negotiables for the week, and building that time into your calendars, even your personal engagements. If they're not added to your work calendar, your team doesn't know about them. So they can't respect that time because they don't know it exists, that you have a priority there. So that's what I would recommend grabbing onto first under that first P of prioritize. Grab that focus and action guide, that daily planner, and just start. It's going to have a huge impact in your week.
Yeah, just getting organized, right? And being proactive. That's just great advice. So we'll make sure that those are linked in the show notes so that people can access those tools. And like anything in Capstone world, we say, make it yours and make it better. So I'm sure folks will figure out how to adapt that for their work. So, well, thank you for your time again, Courtney, on the podcast and your contributions to the topic of culture change and how time, priority, and energy management fits into that. that. And we'll have to be starting to think about what's our next topic? What are we going to bring next time? So I look forward to that. Thanks for being here again today. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Sue. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.